Hello, welcome to Non-Dual Christianity. This video I want to talk about what is impossible or simply unknown in life. And I want to look at some little snippets from John 11 and 12, mostly around the story of Lazarus. That is the person who Jesus resurrected from the dead. And throughout these passages, we see a lot of different characters interacting with Jesus, and they all have these very deep assumptions about what's possible, what's not possible, how God is, who the Christ is supposed to be. And I want to look at those and some lessons we might be able to draw from that. So the first part is Jesus is actually in hiding with his disciples because the Pharisees, the leaders of the Jews, those in power, wanted to kill him. So they're hiding out. He gets word that Lazarus is sick, and he lingers where he is instead of going immediately to heal him, and Lazarus dies. And we know it's serious because one of his disciples, when Jesus finally says, "We're going to go see Lazarus, although he's dead," says, "Well, let us also go so that we may die with him," meaning Jesus, and perhaps tongue-in-cheek Lazarus as well. Jesus arrives, and the first person who comes to him is Martha, Lazarus' sister, and she says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." So interesting how her assumption is Jesus had to be present to heal, even though we have stories where he could heal from a distance. And then Jesus says, "Your brother will rise again." And Martha says, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." So once again, sure, I know he'll live again, but not now, only at the end of time sort of idea. See, she's missing what's possible here because of her assumptions of what's possible. Then Mary, Lazarus' other sister, comes to Jesus, and she says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Once again, assuming that Jesus had to be present to heal. So Jesus has them take him to the tomb of Lazarus. He has them roll away the stone. And they're like, he's been dead 4 days. I don't think you want to do that. It's like, roll it away. And then he says, "Lazarus, come forth." And you have this dead man already in his burial robes and bound walk out of the tomb. And this is such a powerful sign. There's all these people that witness it. And for someone to be resurrected from the dead is unprecedented, right? Who would not believe what they just saw? And yet the reactions are so interesting. So Jesus has been underestimated up to this point, thinking that he had to be present to heal, that he couldn't possibly raise the dead, and yet here he proves it. He shows this sign of his divinity. Well, the reaction then from the Pharisees, those in power, was not to disbelieve his sign, but they assumed that he had come to take power in some way, which means they would lose power. So they immediately have this plot to kill him because they think this is about a power game. Also interesting that they assume they can kill him considering Jesus just proved he could raise somebody from the dead. But they probably are thinking, well, if we kill him, he can't raise himself. Right? And they want to kill Lazarus too, just for good measure. Poor guy, once wasn't enough. They want to kill him. Once again, not because they disbelieved what happened, but because he was testifying and people were believing him, basically leaving their power base going to Jesus. Fast forward a bit. We have Jesus with this crowd, and at one point he says, "Father, glorify your name." And then a voice came out of heaven, "I have both glorified it and will glorify it again." So the crowd of people who stood by and heard it were saying that it had thundered. Others were saying, "An angel has spoken to him." So you have this miraculous sign, and even though everyone experiences the same thing, some people say just thunder, other people say angel. Would seem to very much be what the preconceived notions are of possible, right? And then a little bit later, as Jesus is talking to them, the big question in all the Gospels here is Jesus the Messiah or the Christ? That the one who God was sending in order to rescue his people, in order to initiate, I'd say, their version of heaven in a lot of ways. And what they say to him is, "We have heard out of the law that the Christ is to remain forever. How can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up?" As a euphemism for crucified. "Who is this Son of Man?" So basically what they're saying to him is, you can't possibly be saying that you are the Christ. You can't be the Christ if you're talking about dying, because we know the Christ remains forever. Right? We know, so therefore this can't be true. And Jesus has this brilliant reply, and I think this gets to the heart of some of this. He says, "For a little while longer the light is among you. Walk while you have the light, so the darkness will not overtake you. He who walks in the darkness does not know where he goes." So this metaphor of light and dark, and walking in dark, you don't know where you're going. You might think you do, but you don't. And then a little bit later, it's almost this dare from the prophet Isaiah. In verse 40, he says, "He's blinded their eyes and hardened their heart so they would not see with their eyes and perceive with their heart and be converted, and I heal them." So it sounds like this dare to me because you have this example of this voice from heaven. Right? Is it thunder? Is it God? Is it an angel? See, hearing that, the perception of it is not the issue. It's more of the understanding of it. It's more of the acceptance of what is possible. And that's basically the theme that I see through all these little snippets, is people are coming to Jesus, but they're coming with their preconceived notion of what is possible and impossible, instead of allowing for the divine to be as it is. And that's where this question is, when something happens in life, when you experience something or encounter something that is not explainable to you or is new, how quickly do you push it aside or say, well, that's not possible, instead of simply being open to it being unknown to you? Because the unknown just is something that you haven't experienced yet. It doesn't mean that it's impossible. It just means that you don't understand it. And that's more for me than probably for anyone listening, is the reminder that when we experience something, when we come to an encounter, a life event, how quickly we arrive at our conclusions about it is really important. And it seems wise to be more open and to try to remain in this state of perception, of trying to understand with our deeper layers of being what's happening, instead of being so quick to judge possible, not possible. And one ironic example of this is I find that many Christians would absolutely 100% agree with the fact that Jesus Christ was both 100% man and 100% God, divine. So we have an example of one person without a doubt being man and God. And yet they would then turn around and sometimes be very opposed to anyone else also having the divine nature because of the things that they already know. It sounds very similar in some ways to this, "you can't be the Christ because we know the Christ remains forever" kind of attitude. And yet then on the flip side, you have many people who perhaps would be outside of Christianity that might readily accept the fact that the divinity is within all people, that it's innate. And yet then have a hard time accepting that this character, this person of Jesus Christ, was God, that he did the things that the Bible claims he did, because that's impossible. Even though they would readily acknowledge that the divine is within all people, and I would say that part of the divine is an unlimited nature. So just some things to think about, some things I found interesting, and I appreciate you exploring with me today.